Can we see this? I hear a faint yes, sir, so I'm gonna keep going. Oh, geez. I don't know if I have control over the screen. Yes, I can. All right. So my name is Alan. I'm a photographer and graphic designer. I currently work kind of as a multi-hyphenate. I do a lot of different things. Primarily right now, I'm a studio manager for a photography studio that just opened up in Chelsea here in Manhattan. I currently reside in New York. I do a lot of art direction, photography, and graphic design. I went through the design program that most of you are going through. So I know a bit about how your journey is going, albeit a lot is changing. So I'm sure there's a lot of gappage in terms of what's relatable now, but I think a lot of it will cross over. On my free time, I like to play a lot of pool. That's why I put that picture of me playing pool. Pretty sure I missed that shot. So, you know, take that with a grain of salt. But I love to just appreciate art, go to a lot of museums on my free time. Being in New York, it's definitely great to take advantage of all the great museums that the city has to offer. So I want to take you a little bit through my design journey in this past year. I think it's important to kind of get a sense for the timeline so that you can understand the context of which I'm giving these tips for freelancing. My experience is really unique, and I'm sure all of your experiences are going to be really unique coming out of college. Albeit like the pandemic like throws a wrinkle into everybody's timeline, their plans that they had pre-pandemic, post-pandemic. For example, when I was last sitting in that classroom, Kadima 113, I had no clue that leaving that classroom was going to be the last time that I would ever step foot in it as a student. So seeing you guys sitting there is like kind of a trip. So yeah, we all have plans, and life throws us a lot of curveballs. And you know, I didn't think that I would be a year before graduating, I would be in New York, and yeah, here I am. So I want to take you through a little bit of my design journey, take you a little bit through my photography journey, and then we'll get into a little bit of my tips for freelancing and my experience. Starting off with right out of college, I graduated last May. I moved to New York in June and quickly started freelancing from there. My first client was somebody that wanted pretty much full creative direction, brand design, packaging design, logo creation, social media design, website design. There are fireworks going off in the background. It's not even close to 4th of July. I have no clue what somebody could be celebrating. That's so wild. Sorry. And so that was I got thrown into the deep end with branding design. I do not consider myself somebody who is brand design centered by any stretch of the imagination. In college, I really liked print, and I'm sure a lot of you like print. Unfortunately, there's not many print jobs available. It's so hard to find just print specific jobs. You'll have to cross over, but I saw an opportunity with this branding design project that I knew that if I stuck it out and I was able to create good brand designs, that I'd get to make print designs eventually. And so that's something that I was able to add into my repertoire. So yeah, a little bit of my work involves appropriating product photography and adding on labeling and making mock-ups with existing photography for a brand. Just a big mix of things, but the main thing that I started off on was creating a full brand design. I was able to hire a fellow alumni who went to Stack State, Bailey, and she was in my cohort, and so I was able to bring her on to create the logo mark. I made the logo type, she made the logo mark, and we made this really great daily fiber supplement called Bacchanal. It exists today. It's launching on Amazon in like maybe a month or two. So that's really cool. A really great part about being a freelancer is that you can subcontract things out. You can contract your friends to make work. I made a full brand for the same company. I made another brand for them that was a sustainable marketplace. And so here's a little bit of the work there. I made an entire website and art directed their product photography. That was an interesting challenge that I think, you know, in the era of remote work, a lot of you will possibly be challenged with. I had to explain to my client how to photograph who had never photographed before, and like teaching them how to set design, teaching them how to light and orient their camera correctly and compose, and then teaching them how to edit so that they could be self-sustaining and not need to hire me out every time they need to update the site with a new photo. So that was a really great challenge. This is a little bit more of that branding work that I did for Bacchanal. I was hired for my photography skills as a designer. So this was an interesting call for me. He was like, I like your photography. I don't need photography right now. I need a designer. Can you do design for me? And I was like, sure. And so it was a great like 6-month journey building out this branding system, and getting to do product photography eventually. Once we actually had a physical product, we built out a brand. I finally got to the thing that was what hired me in the first place. Going into my photography, I dip into so many different things. My background when I first started was film photography. As many of you might have taken, I took a black and white photography course in community college at Sierra College, fell in love with it. That turned into a hobby / passion on the side while I was studying biology of all subjects. I was going to be a doctor. So that was not for me. I really loved photography. And that's how I ended up in the design program somehow. I was like, I didn't want to go to school for photography, but I knew I wanted to be in that realm. So that's how I ended up at Sac State. But with photography, I've always had a passion for portraiture. So that's kind of where my, where I kind of gravitate towards and where a lot of my work ends up. But that doesn't mean that the things that I learned from portraiture photography doesn't cross over into other things, like especially lighting. If you know how to light a person, you can light pretty much anything. So here's a little bit of the commercial work that I've done. Recently, I've been doing a lot, well, up until about last month, I've been doing a lot of work revolving around handbags. Very interesting client base. So shooting a lot of just product photography and imagery that will then be used for digital ads. So knowing how to compose an image, giving it enough room to appropriate some text onto it or to add a promo code, to make it a full width banner, learning, you know, what are different aspect ratios for different types of ads that their ad servicer needs, and then like having to consider those in the storyboarding and the shooting of the product was a really great challenge. Lifestyle and like the fashion photography side of things was also a challenge because those same needs needed to be met. So it's been great to just try out different things, and definitely a big mix of things, but for the same client, all within the same system. This is where I think most of my passion lies, which is in portraiture. I really enjoy just connecting with somebody and capturing their essence, and spending time with them and getting to know what makes them unique and what makes them kind of shine a little bit, and then trying to capture that, which is easier said than done. But yeah, that's a little bit of what I do portraiture wise. And then as of late, you know, I mentioned that I'm a studio manager in Chelsea. The photographer that I studio manage for and who owns the studio is also who I do lighting design for. And first assisting. Basically, what that involves is just showing up to set with a bit of a pitch from the client of what they want. They'll give reference images. We kind of boil that down into what we think is the essence of the photos that they're looking for. Like, okay, they gave us 7 different photos. They're of like Serena Williams, one's of a dog, and another one's of, you know, 2 kids in a park. And you're like, okay, what's the crossover here? And usually it's like, oh, it's the lighting, or oh, it's a colorful background, or it's a shallow depth of field. That's what they're trying to explain. But because they're not designers or they're not photographers, they don't really know how to put them into words. And so we interpret that. We then set up a plan. We figure out what the lighting is going to be, figure out what modifiers go on the lights, which is just a fancy way of saying how we're going to shape the light, and do a bunch of tests. And the end result is what you see here. There's such a great challenge to this, is that we work in so many different contexts. For example, the picture on the far left that you see there is shot on a street that's blocked off by the NYPD. You've got about 10 minutes to get the shot. You've got the cast for about 5 minutes. There's people everywhere, and you have to figure out how to light it, be prepared for when they're ready, and then get as many shots as you can within those 5 minutes. Other ones are a lot more slow going. Like the picture on the far right is for a play that's happening in London, that we spent basically 4 hours taking that same portrait over and over again until the lighting was just right. And then the middle is kind of where graphic design, photography, and everything else kind of comes into play, where I feel like all of my strengths and all of my background comes together. I did not do the design for this. I did not do the photography for it or any of the editing. But in the assisting portion of it, I am in charge of ensuring that the lighting is true to the references that they wanted, that there's enough space made for all of the typography, that there are plates, meaning like plates are what are used when you're compositing several images into one. For example, those feathers were not shot at the same time that they were shot looking up. We do have iterations where that's happening, but what actually happens is a plate or a photograph is taken with the subjects gone from the frame, and the feathers are just falling from the sky. And we're photographing a bunch of those that then a Photoshopper can then grab that empty frame, place whatever the best images of the couple are, and then place that in, and then they can appropriate text on top of that. So knowing the design process and knowing how a designer might think actually really helps me as an assistant, as a photographer, because of everything described before. Like knowing to remind the photographer, hey, we need to shoot plates. Hey, you need to give them a bit more headroom, or hey, we should change this lighting. I don't think this is going to be pink enough for what they're trying to do, or this isn't going to blend well in post. Those are all really valuable assets to know. And I think it's where playing into whatever your passions are, whatever your side hobbies are, can like actually pay dividends for you on the job. It may not feel like on paper, like the things that you're doing that are aside from, you know, your responsibilities as a creative are going to help. And somehow they come to the front in a real-time situation, and you're not necessarily relied on, but you have the opportunity to step up and make an impact on a project. So yeah, there's a little bit more of the lighting direction. We oftentimes are setting up really complicated sets, and other times we're on location. For example, the middle image is at a hotel lobby. And so there's not much we can do other than move around some furniture. The far left is a completely made up set of an Oval Office that's in shambles. So there's such a mix of different things that I do in terms of assisting, like set designing and assisting with building a set too. I think that's it in terms of showing the work I've been up to in the past year. other than showing you the studio that I work at, it's a pretty great studio. If you're ever in New York and need to shoot, let me know. Happy to set you up. I don't know if the GRIDS officers, I know you're not in frame, you're probably off to the side. I don't know if you want me to go on straight into the freelancing tips, if you want me to wait for a little bit of Q&A, or you want me to just roll through to the finish and then wait for Q&A after. How do you want to go about it?
I think that it's fine if you wanted to branch out into freelancing, talking about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll just go straight into it then. This is just tips for freelancing I wish I knew sooner. It's like, this is going to be a pretty condensed, and like I can go on this forever, but I think that being a freelancer is one of the toughest things because there's not a handbook and there's not a correct way to go about freelancing. But there are certain things that I feel like cross over no matter what you're doing and like in what capacity you're freelancing, whether that be part-time or full-time. And I just kind of put them down into bullets. Stream of consciousness today while at work. And I hope it resonates with some of you. The first one would be to keep a calendar and schedule everything in it, no matter how small. I cannot reiterate how important that is when you start getting into the world of the workforce. When you're in school, everything is preset for you. Everything's regimented. You know exactly when you're going to be done, and you know you have a shift at the restaurant that you work at from 6 to 10:30, and everything kind of can be pretty set for an entire week or 2 weeks or a month ahead of time. For me, in my experience, and I know a lot, I can speak for a lot of my friends that freelance, your schedule changes and varies so much, and no week is the same. There's always something being thrown into the mix. And I think it's such a good habit to start, even right now when like life can be a little bit more, I don't want to call it stale, but it could be a little bit more predictable, to build that habit of keeping a calendar and scheduling out your day. Because the one thing that was the most difficult, I think, out of like the adulting part of freelancing was work-life balance, understanding how much time I have at the end of my day to just make a meal, shower, read a book. Like all of those things, you just figure, oh, I'll just like squeeze it in eventually. And then when you schedule yourself out to your clients, you realize, oh, I only left myself a 8-hour or a 10-hour gap, and I have to squeeze sleep in there too. So that's going to be hard. So yeah, be mindful of your time. And when you're scheduling it, I think you become more mindful of it and you respect your time a lot more because you know it's finite. Another thing is to start looking for clients before a project concludes. Like when your job is at its busiest and you know it's like you're preparing all the final assets for delivery, that should be exactly when you should be reaching out to people, talking to friends to see if there are any projects on the horizon. Because there's nothing more deflating than like the feeling of like, oh my God, I'm done with this project. This feels amazing. Like I've delivered to the client. They're happy. They've paid me. Everything's great. Now what? And you have this gap. And as a freelancer, you can't really afford to have gaps unless you're getting really high paying clients that can kind of afford you a little bit of breathing room. For the most part, your clients are paying your living wage. You have to account for taxes. Like you have to have a consistent thing on the docket in order to, make ends meet. So it's always good to be outreaching. If you're getting inquiries and you're swamped, try your best to sell your clients on like a future date and see if they're flexible on their delivery dates for stuff. also try your hand at maybe juggling multiple projects at once. It's not the easiest thing, but I think Sac State does a really good job of prepping you for that by having, like, especially your senior year, multiple projects happening at the same time. It's no different, except the stakes are a little bit harder in that your income is now in the line of fire rather than a grade. But I think everybody is more than well prepared coming out of the Sac State program to do that. Understand your rights, understand your contract. I just learned that lesson so hard myself. Knowing, like, please reach out if you have a contract and you want to know what it is that it's saying, because you should have a contract first and foremost whenever you're talking with a client. You should know your rights as an individual, as an employee. And then if you have an LLC or any type of a business that you're operating under, understand what interacting with another business means. And I can go into an entire diatribe about that probably at a later date. I don't want to bulk up this talk with like finance and legal stuff, but yeah, just knowing what your rights are, knowing what's in the contract, knowing the scope of your project, know what the scope of your project is, and stand your ground. If something comes out of the scope of your project, make sure you're being compensated for that. When I first moved to New York in July, I picked up a client that was a nonprofit organization. They paid me very little money for a whole brand like redesign, and it became more and more work, and I never spoke up until the very end. And they're like, why didn't you tell us that this wasn't within the scope? We would have happily paid you more. And I'm like, well, I just figured that, like, if I'm on
Hey,
the
Alan,
smartest thing.
we missed some of the words you were saying. You kind of lagged, so there was no words
Oh
coming.
no. Where did I lag out at? Sorry. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now. What was it?
All right. Where was I at? I mean, this is going to be tough because
They asked why didn't you say anything?
Okay, we're talking
gotcha.
about the
Yeah.
Yes.
So they basically said, like, we would have happily, paid you more if you would have just said something, or we would have just, limited the project to whatever was under the scope. And so I think that that's why it's very important to know your rights and to stick to your guns, because if you're not communicating with your client and not knowing, where you stand with your contract and the delivery of things, you're going to be taken for a ride. These people need to make a profit, and they're trying to get labor at a pretty reasonable deal, especially if you're, coming right out of college. They're hiring new graduates because they know that they can be paid at an entry level rate. And so just because you're getting paid an entry level rate doesn't mean that you're an entry level worker. You're a professional. You've gone to design school for design, like, you know what you're doing. So sticking to your guns, knowing what your contract is. Again, if you have any questions regarding what, like, a contract should have in it, I've been very fortunate to have people, take me under their wing and show me what they used. And, a lot of it's just been parceling together some of my friends' different contracts, talking to a lawyer, talking to somebody that knows if it's legally binding or not is also very important. I know that's not cheap, but it's worth it in the long run. Expensing everything. Like, when you're a freelancer, you have to keep in mind that, especially in the state of California, state of New York is no different. You're a 1099 employee, meaning that none of your income is taxed. So the government's going to come for that money at some point. It happens to be at the end of a year, at the end of a quarter. And so in order to limit how much they tax out of you, you can write things off. You've probably heard so many things about, like, what a write-off is. And what a write-off basically is like, say I go and I get a cup of coffee. If I am doing work while I'm making that cup of coffee, technically that's expensible. It's a business expense. It's my lunch. Um, that let's say this coffee is $5. That's $5 of income that's less taxable than before. You're already going to spend the $5 on the coffee. Might as well not have the government, take that extra $5 worth of taxes out of your income. And knowing what's speaking with an accountant and knowing what is expensible. Like I found out that going to a museum, going to a bookstore, buying art supplies, buying pencils and pen and paper for when I'm taking notes for my clients, all of that is expensible. My MacBook is expensible. My headphones, because I use it for audio editing, are expensible. All of those things make life so much easier at the time of like paying taxes, because your brain, when you get a nice check from a client, is like, oh, yay, I'm $500 richer. No, you're not. You're about $300 richer because you have to put $200 away for taxes. So keep that in mind. In the same vein of finances, separate your finances. If you're going to freelance, it costs no money to open a business checking account. Please don't do what I did. Don't put everything on one credit card. And then at the end of the year, your accountant's like, you have to go back through every statement and with a highlighter and highlight anything that you think might be an expense. I spent a week highlighting. I went through like 2 highlighters. Do not do it. Pay the money, or no, don't even pay the money. There's nothing to pay. Open up a business account, file with the IRS for an employee identification number, which is separate from your social security number. So you could have a legitimate business and set everything separate. You're going to be so much happier at the end of the year. There's so many ways to bookkeep and to track your expenses. I use QuickBooks. My friends also use QuickBooks or Wave. Wave is the free alternative to QuickBooks. And I'm happy to also send a bunch of freelancing links that were sent to me in terms of finances, legal, all of that. Happy to throw a few in the chat after this. What else do I have? I have a whole nother, perfect. Okay. My last thing. This is all still related to freelancing, but this is more widespread, I think. And some of it I've already gone over because I tend to ramble, as you can tell. But the next point is learning to sell yourself, your ideas and your vision. I think you all do it to some extent in school, but I think it's not harped enough. I think a lot of the time, especially I can remember in a few of my junior year classes, not being able to convince my professors that an idea has the legs to go on into a project, and wanting to place the blame on them, being like, oh, they don't see it. They don't understand what I want to do. This is so frustrating. Now I have to do this, my third option, which I wasn't happy about. And it actually worked as a great lesson, not having my teachers allow me to work on these projects that I wanted to work on and choosing worse options that I thought weren't going to work as well, was that I just didn't sell them well enough. I didn't explain what my vision was. I didn't put enough effort in the ideation of it to make them sign off on the next portion. The same thing happens in the professional setting. Like if you half-ass a pitch deck and you only emphasize one element of a design or one element of whatever it is that you're pitching, it's very difficult for somebody to extrapolate on that and say, oh, I can see how you're going to take this 30 steps further into the future and make this whatever it is that you're envisioning. You have to be able to use your words, use your creativity, use your ability to sketch, to mock stuff up, to really sell your ideas and your vision. Being able to practice speaking. I'm not doing the best at speaking today. I'm sorry, I just got off a very long shift of work. But knowing how to speak to a client specifically, how to be respectful in taking feedback, how to give feedback, and clarify. Those are all the most important part of freelancing and of design, period. I think a lot of people, especially in the pandemic, were able to just kind of hunker down and, be given an assignment and just work and not necessarily deal with too many people. And even coming out of it, like when I was pre-pandemic, when I was still in school, I remember so many of my contemporaries that were in class with me and my peers, they would like get an assignment and then they wouldn't speak or like brainstorm or collaborate with any of their classmates. Became a very competitive environment. And to that, I say, I think that's really silly. I think that's detrimental to the way in which you work. Take advantage of the people that are sitting next to you in class, collaborate with them, ask their opinion on something you're working on. You're not competing for anything in school. And you're not competing with your coworkers either. They're all there to help. So being able to just like practice collaborating and speaking and understanding that like,
Oh. Sorry, Alan, it happened again.
your classmate that's sitting next to you, you're also pitching. Oh, geez. My connection is unstable.
It happened again.
I know. And it's my Wi-Fi. I think this Wi-Fi has got to go. Where was I at?
You were talking about how it's not a competition with your cohort and that they're here to help.
Yes. This is actually a great time to get a little bit of water. So I'm gonna get a little water. I hope I'm not speaking too much. I'm trying to fit a lot in. Freelancing is a very loaded topic, but I'm trying to be as thorough as possible here. Yeah, just like understanding that you're not in competition with people, that like that collaboration is actually great practice for how you pitch. Like practice pitching to your classmate that's sitting next to you the idea that you have as if you're pitching it to a client. Clients often are really relatable. I found that like I used to think of clients and like the way in which my friends describe clients is like this big scary thing that's like people sitting at like these desks that are somehow comedically higher than you and they're looking down at you and they're like yes or no to your design. It's not that way. It's usually just like some guy that looks probably pretty similar to me, sometimes younger than me. And they're very relatable and they wanted to see your personality shown through in the way in which you work. And I'm sorry, but like sitting at your desk and not talking to anybody and sketching, it's not the way to win somebody over. And so like, it's best to just practice doing that while you're in school so that you're not shocked by the difference when you get out into the real world. Like, I think socializing is a part of design, and just like school is, teaching you design skills, it's also teaching you those communication skills. So make use of that time when you're forced to be with people, whether you like them or not. You're forced to communicate. Next thing, this is out of order. I should have put that with the finances, but it's okay. We're going to keep going. Is to not have a set rate, adjusting your rate as you see fit. This is kind of going back to like knowing your contract and knowing scope. Like if you need more time to work on something and you know that time is longer than what you quoted somebody out for, make sure you're accounting for that. And this also kind of coincides with the clarify everything point that's right below it. It's like, refer to the scope of your contract. If you have a rate that you had for somebody and it's a similar project, but it takes more time, and maybe you were referred by the previous client, they're like, well, we were referred by them and we heard about your rate. You have to use your communication skills and explain the nuance to their project and explain how this is going to take longer and it's because of X, Y, and Z. And most people are respectful of it. If they have any gripes, then, that's more of a negotiation at that point. But stand your ground. And sometimes it's better to just turn somebody down if you realize that they're trying to just like take you for a ride and get a deal out of you. It honestly works out in the long run, saying no to clients sometimes because of that. But yeah, don't have a set rate. Every project's going to be unique, especially in design. With photography, it's a little different. Like when you're photographing somebody, a headshot is a headshot is a headshot. But when you're in design, like every single design is different. Does it require more illustration? Does it require more typesetting? All of that is different. Like, do I need to be talking to a developer? Like when I was doing website design, I had no clue that I was going to be the boss of a developer, and I had to meet with them every morning at 9 a.m. and give them notes on their designs and their coding. Those are all things that can be worked out in the contract. And usually if you're really straightforward and honest with your client and just say, hey, you know what, this is becoming a lot. It's not that I'm not capable of doing it. It's just more that I need more compensation for the amount of time I'm pouring into it, is very essential to the way in which you operate. Lastly, before I open up for any questions, is just to be kind to yourself, to know that like in the hustle and bustle of working, it isn't all about work. You should have some hobbies on the side, because those hobbies and those things that you're passionate about that aren't necessarily design related are the things that give you the energy and the juice to be able to be creative. I didn't realize the marathon that making the thing that like makes you the most happy, which is being creative, was also like the thing that was like my life source. And so when you go to work and you realize that you're depending on that for work, that life source for work, like when you're done with it, it can be very draining if you don't put the right tools in motion to subsidize for it. So for example, when I first got to the city, and much like right now, I'm in a hectic stage of my life, if you want to put it that way. I kind of buried myself with work to the point where I didn't really have a good work-life balance, and I paid for it. Like I was very unmotivated. I wasn't able to create really good ideas. I kind of dragged for about 2 months where I just felt like the work wasn't coming easily to me, and it was showing, and my clients weren't necessarily upset with any of the work that I was doing. It was more of like, Alan had a really productive Friday, and then Monday through Thursday, he didn't really do much. And sometimes that happens because of just like, you're truly just dragging your feet because you don't have the energy for it. So being kind to yourself just means, taking a morning to just go for a walk is sometimes all you need. Having a little quiet time to yourself, maybe reading a book, maybe going to see a great concert. All those things, although like freelance can be really hectic and you can constantly be like focused on like, oh my God, I need to get clients, I need to make money, I need to get clients, I need to make money. Taking a little bit of time to just like sit with yourself and enjoy a little bit of life will honestly give you the energy to make up for the time you missed not working. So yeah, that's all I have for you. I'm happy to go over some older slides. Thank you. And I'd love to answer some questions if time permits. I think I'm doing good on time, right?
Can you just go up there?
Yeah.
Oh.
Introduce yourself.
Okay. Hello. Do I type it?
Hello. I can hear you. So you could just ask me.
Hey, my name's David. I'm a pre-design. Thank you for the presentation. It was great. I learned a lot from you. But my question is, what made you move to New York?
Great question. Truly work opportunity is what it boils down to. My mom's in here, so I have to be very careful about the words I'm saying. I don't know if she's still in here, but she is. I didn't leave because of my mom. Let's just say that I miss her very much. I'm glad that I was able to spend time with her this weekend. I'm a very family oriented guy, so it's very hard it's very hard for me to be separate from my family. But I had to recognize and reconcile with the fact that my two options truly for the things that I wanted to do were either LA or New York. San Francisco was very tech oriented and UX UI oriented. It's not necessarily something that I find myself leaning towards. So LA has a really big entertainment industry. I've always worked in music. Like when I first started doing photography, I did a lot of touring musicians and touring acts and doing music festivals. I couldn't even think of the word. Wow. I did it for 4 years of my life and I don't remember the word. So LA made sense for a second. And I can't stand LA, to be honest with you. So New York became like the second option. There's just way more opportunity on the photographic side of things. I really enjoy this city. I love the pace of it. It's truly like what gives me life is just seeing other people that are super motivated and that are here for the same exact reason. Most of the people you run into here are transplants. They're not from around here and they're here to work. And I think I needed that for where I'm at in life right now. So that's why I chose New York.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you, by the way. Best of luck in pre-design and hope you make it into the program. I love this whole like standing up and coming up to greet me. This is great. Hi.
Hey here. I have a question for you. When you were still a student, were you already doing some side hustle? How did you do that? Combine it with, the work, the studies that you were part of, and then also, how did you find your first clients? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, so I've been doing photography for probably 4 or 5 years before I got into the program, but it was always just touch and go. I had to pay my way through college. Luckily, I was really fortunate. I have the great privilege that I was able to save money by living at home. Thank you, Mom. But I had to pay my way through college. So I juggled 2-3 jobs at the same time as going to school. Not so much during the pandemic. I worked in the service industry, so none of that really transferred over. I just sat at home. That was a great asset to have for a little bit. But I squeezed in shoots wherever I could. My mom can attest to that. I would literally like run from class to go to a shoot. And that just became that those shoots, those side hustles really came through social media. Unfortunately, Instagram is not the app that it once was, but most of my work was coming through Instagram. Now, I mean, I think you could still do it. You just have to be really consistent about posting. But that was how I was getting work done while I was in school. And then I was just always like going to community events and networking and meeting up with friends and getting coffee with people and learning about their workflow and the way in which they made art. That was really helpful for me, is to just like build community. There was so much community to be had in Sacramento. There's like, for example, there's a club called Beers and Camera, and all they do is grab beers and talk about cameras all day. So if you're a nerd for that, definitely go check that out. There's so many museums, like check in with your museums, like community events. There's so many different things that happen at the Crocker. There's things that happen at SF MoMA. If you want to take the drive, go to those community events. There's a really good book publisher out of the Bay Area called TBW, and they oftentimes host events. The Frankel Gallery hosts amazing events to amazing artists. Please reach out to me too via social media, and I'm happy to like remind you of all these things. I'm just rambling off. But that was kind of a part of the networking side of things. And then when I graduated and found my first clients, some of them came through referrals from friends. I kind of just made a mass announcement on social media that I, had gone into design and I was looking for work. And then I used my first retainer client, which is what paid my bills all the way through till February. He found me through a website called Working Not Working. It's basically LinkedIn for creative individuals. You have to submit 3 portfolio pieces and be approved to be on the platform. Basically, you just have to have 3 portfolio pieces. There's not necessarily like an approval process. Like they don't say yes or no. They need you to put up work. But the cool thing about that is that like you can kind of just follow people and see what projects they're working on as they upload them. And he kind of just found a few of my projects that linked him to my portfolio. He saw that I did photography. He was like, wait a minute, you do photography. This is cool. And that's how I got referred to for my first big client. That nonprofit that I got worked into the ground for a month of working because I didn't know how to communicate was through a interview. I interviewed for an internship. The internship did not pay much. I was freshly moved to New York and I was like, I cannot take this. I literally could not afford to be paid by them. My time was worth, in my opinion, more than what they were offering to pay me, and the time that I could be potentially getting paid by somebody else for more money. And so I turned them down, and they said, well, why don't you freelance for us? And that's how that came about. So there's different avenues to get freelance work. Creative Circle is a free, what do they consider themselves? I guess they're a recruiting source. So basically what you do is you sign up, you tell them, how much you're wanting to get paid, your portfolio, what you do, what you want to specialize in. And every day they send out like 2 or 3 emails for jobs that are coming up in your area, whether they're remote, whether they're hybrid, whether they're fully in person, what the scope of the job is, what the pay is potentially sometimes. And you just have to reply to that email and they'll put you in a list. And
Oh no. Happened again.
my roommate works from home and he's been telling me about how bad the internet is. Wait, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. He's been telling me about how bad the internet is, but because I work like at the studio, I should have just taken this call at the studio, but because I work at the studio, I never experienced it. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm sure it's terrible. And I just leave. And now I'm really experiencing it. So I feel a little bit of a relatability to him now. What was I talking about? Creative Circle? Did you hear that part?
Yeah, we did.
Okay. Yeah. Creative Circle is a great platform. It's a great way to just be fed a bunch of jobs. Specifically, the San Francisco Bay Area has a lot of really good openings. I don't recommend necessarily working for a startup. They can be a bit chaotic, but sometimes if the timing is right and the project's right, definitely hop on it. Should I just answer this question that's in the chat, or should I, what do you want me to do? I'm also going to stop sharing because we're not really staring at anything anymore. The question in the chat was, how is moving away from a support system affect your day-to-day life? I'm also family oriented, and while working out of state is amazing, I worry that will be a bit much and it will affect my work. I think it was something for me that I was really well prepared for in terms of like, I knew what I wanted to do months in advance. I think I was telling my mom like years in advance. But the seed planting, I think, really started. We graduated in May. I want to say February. I started letting my mom know and like my family know, hey, I think I'm moving when I graduate. And so that I think helped us prepare a bit as a family. I think it got a little bit rougher when I found out my sister was pregnant. And I was like, cool. So I'm gonna have a nephew that's gonna be born right after I leave. Cool. So that was a bit tough for me, but yeah, I think for me, the greatest asset that I've had in terms of support has been just making friends. In a city like New York is really easy to make friends. So I speak from a very specific experience. Moving to a different state could mean moving to Nebraska, and maybe you don't make as many friends as you probably make here, but finding a sense of community anywhere can really ground you. like I said, like even in Sacramento, there's so many community events. If you look for them, if you don't look for them, you'll never see them and you feel like it's a ghost town. But if you look for them, there's plenty of other people that are like you, that are looking to connect with people that are like you. And yeah, you just kind of have to reach out there and put yourself out there and be a little bit vulnerable and be okay with the idea of like, hey, this might suck for a little bit, but the outcome is going to be worth it. But it's also weighing the options. Like, I don't think if I had out of college a consistent work opportunity in Sacramento that had, you know, growth available for me creatively, personally, and financially, I don't think I would have left Sacramento. I just saw the landscape coming out of the pandemic of the workforce, and like speaking from experience and from my friends' experiences that graduated in the same cohort as me, it is not fun going into an interview room and sitting across from 10 people that you graduated with and knowing you're competing with them for a job, right? It sucks because you know that it's a competition now. And like, you know that everything's like kind of contrary to what I just said previously about like not being a competition in the classroom. Now you're in the real world and you're all clawing for one job. And I didn't want to play in that. And I am glad that I made the choice that I made, but it was definitely difficult to reconcile with both of those options. It's like, hey, I could stick it out and try and see if I can find something in Sacramento, but this exciting thing is waiting for me on the horizon. I should just give it a shot. So I guess, Adriana, if I was to say anything, I'd say if your heart feels like it's compelling you to try something new and to go for a switch, just try it. What's a year? You know, a year goes by so quick. I was making this deck today and I was like, this all happened in a year. I felt like I wasn't doing anything. And then you're forced to look at everything that you do. It's similar to when you make your portfolio at the end of like your senior year and you have to present a spring show. You're like, oh my God, I made all this, but I'm just so focused on cutting these squares out for my portfolio, my Alvarez color studies, that I had no clue that I did all these other things. It's like, it's truly just perspective. But yeah, give yourself a little bit of a 6-month year gap and try something new. You might just love it.
I see that, Yenny, would you like to ask a question? I noticed that you turned on your camera.
I'm actually not a design major or anything, but I'm just wondering, what do you guys do when you're running out of ideas? Or you just don't know what to do with this request?
That's a great question. You said you guys, but I'm assuming you're asking me. But yes, we could also ask the rest of the people at Kadima what they do. But I'm going to refer to, I think, the best advice probably I've ever been given in the design courses that I took, which was from Richard Pratt. He alluded to something that I can't like perfectly quote it. And I don't really know what context caused him to say this. I think I was talking about his master's work that he did at RISD. And he talked about playfulness and the idea of playfulness. And when you're creating ideas, a lot of the times you're trying to edit before the work is even like manifested into like an inkling of an idea, because we forget about the idea of playfulness, like the idea of just being able to be silly and like throw ideas at a board and see what sticks. Oftentimes we kind of get ahead of ourselves and don't let that sapling turn into a tree, right? Like we kind of smush it before it becomes anything. So playing a little bit of a game of what if. It's like, okay, like what if this orange had ears, and just like drawing it and like, you know what I mean? Like it's silly. It makes no sense. And it's like truly just like your brain is out of ideas and you're out of thoughts, but like, let's just see where this goes. And then you could be doodling for hours and like if something comes of it. Even if it's not in that specific sitting or that session that you're trying to work on something, later down the line, something's going to stick. For example, I can give you a perfect example. My independent project, my senior year, was a concept that I came up with independent of me knowing about it 6 months prior. I was sitting on an airplane coming home from Mexico, and I had AirPods on, and I wanted to watch a movie, and I didn't have wired earbuds, so I was like, okay, I guess I just won't be able to listen to whatever this movie is saying. So I put on Stanley Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey, and I was listening to this album while watching the movie, and I was just like, whatever, I'll just like try and see if this is the soundtrack to this movie. And it was a really interesting experience. I felt like they melded together somehow weirdly, and that was cool. And then 6 months later, I'm working on a vinyl cover project with Richard Pratt, and he's like, yeah, like tell me what you're wanting to work on. And I was like forcing all these ideas and I couldn't figure out anything to do. And then I was listening to that album and it reminded me of the movie. And I was like, what if I took the visual elements of this movie and I combined it with the feeling of this album and the album's content itself to create an entire like new redesign for this album cover. I can make a lyric booklet, I can make a vinyl, I can make a CD case. And then all of a sudden I'm grabbing screenshots from the movie, I'm throwing them into Photoshop, I'm doing all this crazy manipulation to it. I'm like, oh my God, this is so much fun, because I'm just like allowing myself to try and allowing it to, if it sucks and if it fails, it's just a file on my computer. I can throw it in the trash can. But I think a lot of us like want to force things. We want it to like mean a lot, but you never know what like just living your life and tapping into your experiences and like just allowing yourself to be playful with something can do for you.
So basically, when you're running off this, you just start brainstorming, throwing everything on board, and then just
I would say like just like most of the time I'm thinking about things in my life experience that could relate to the project at hand, like projecting my own feelings about it onto it, because ultimately when you're designing, you're adding your own personal touch. So a lot of it's like a balance of like, how much of my personality am I going to put into this? If this is more corporate, there's not much personality in it. If this is less corporate, then I can put more of my own personality into it and I can convince the client that that's a good idea. But it depends on the gravity of the work, and it depends on how relatable it is too. If the work's not relatable, it's probably going to be a lot harder to be able to pull from your personal experience.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Does anyone else have any questions?
Hello, I'm Tyler.
Hello.
I'm a free designer. So I had 2 questions for you. So the first question that I had was, what is like some benefits that you found working in freelance compared to settling down with just like a specific company that you have just a constant flow of income with? And then also, what is the best way to market yourself to like a client to choose you in a very competitive environment?
Sure. I think the second one's a little bit more loaded than the first one. Let me get my thoughts in order before I really consider your question. Let me answer the second one first, actually. When you're in a competitive environment, a lot of the times, you have to think about like, if you're in a corporate setting, it's about playing the corporate game, which is if you're applying for a job that's very clear set on reading your resume and writing out all of your hard qualities and your soft traits and all the programs that you know and to what degree do you know them. You kind of like, I at first had so much resentment towards that process and towards writing a cover letter. If you want to work for those types of jobs, you have to play that game, and you have to play it well, and you have to know who it is you're competing against, how it is that they get successful on LinkedIn. And then you also have to tap into the mind of what would somebody who's hiring me be looking for. I just went through, when I was working for a client, the process of hiring somebody. And it was really enlightening to realize how much of the stuff that I was like harping on for hours just did not matter whatsoever when I was hiring a junior designer under me. So the one thing that I would say is the presentation of your resume matters. Like if I'm hiring a graphic designer who works in email design and their resume is not typeset well, I'm immediately throwing it out. You're a liability. You cannot be trusted. How is it that the thing that's going to get you hired going to be treated with that little respect for yourself? How are you going to treat something that you're just getting paid for? You're just writing for a paycheck. I have to see that you care. And so a lot of the people that were making it into the next round were people that just showed the effort, made sure that when I clicked on their URL in their PDF for their website, that it was linked to their website, or that at the very least, if their website wasn't linkable and you couldn't click it, that I could at least drag and select the text. Some of these people were sending in like PDFs where like the text was the JPEG. And so I had to like go in and manually type in each individual letter from their URL. And you don't think that's much, but when I'm going through 250 applications, I'm tossing your resume out. And I didn't get it. And like, you know, my professors would tell me, and I just didn't understand like why like people would just like treat you with so much neglect in the workforce. It's like, it's truly just your time. You have to respect your time. And like these people are getting paid a lot of money and they know it to hire people, and they really have to sacrifice, you know, the potential of somebody being really great, but just not knowing how to make a good resume, and somebody who already has it down. So to put yourself in a competitive environment, you have to be competitive. You have to have a competitive mindset and be motivated to learn the system that it is that you're trying to play. But also just being a great, like a solid teammate and a good human being. I don't know how many times I've heard of my friends being hired on sets for just being somebody that's good to hang out with, or good to collaborate with, and good to bounce ideas off of. There's been people that I've worked in on a photography standpoint, that this is kind of getting away a little bit from design, but like when you're on set with, you know, things for photography, some of these days are 14, 16 hours. If you're a bore to hang out with for 16 hours, I do not want you on a multi-day shoot. If you're a negative Nancy, if you're always, you know, bringing your personal life into your work and not being able to be professional, not knowing when to, you know, fool around and when to be serious about things, again, not a good teammate, not somebody that you want to be around. And no matter how skilled you are, I've met certain people that like could, you know, blow me out of the water in terms of their abilities with like Capture One or Photoshop, but they're horrible to be around. They're terrible energy in the room. And like somebody that's teachable, that may not have as many skill sets or as much experience on sets, is going to get the job because of just being like a genuinely good person to be around. And then going back to your first question, well, remind me again a little bit about the first question. I kind of get the essence of it, but I want to make sure I cover everything.
It was just pretty much like what benefits have you found working for freelance compared to going to like just one company?
So funny enough, like being under a retainer, you kind of get a little bit of a sense of what it's like to be salaried, because the way most retainers work, and if you're working for like kind of a bigger corporation, a retainer works in that they're paying you for a month's worth of work or 2 weeks worth of work, depending on, you know, what the contract states. But you're basically an employee for them. You get a desk at their office and you sit down and you participate in meetings. And so you kind of get a sense of what the workforce is, but you don't necessarily, you don't have to abide by the rules of like their company. Like you don't fall under their company policies. You don't fall under a specific dress code. I never had to like show up in a suit and tie to any of these jobs where other people were, because I'm a contractor. I don't necessarily need to do that. Sure, it might be good if you do, but like as you can tell, I like to like wear a beanie every once in a while, and like I'm sure that's not necessarily like technically like professional protocol. I know my mom, she's here, she works for SMUD. Like if I showed up in a peace beanie, they probably wouldn't like.
It happened again, the freeze.
Oh, what a bore. This is terrible. I'm sorry, guys. Remind me again where I was at.
Beanies.
What was it? Oh, beanies. Yeah. Like if I was working in a professional setting, probably a beanie is not the best place to, or best thing to be wearing to the workforce. But because you're a freelancer, like you kind of get afforded these little like workarounds. But I think the biggest benefit to being a freelancer is just having full autonomy over your schedule. When you get put on for hourly things, that may not be the case. Like when I was on a retainer with another client, I had a set schedule that I had worked out in my contract that I eventually ended up actually negotiating out of my contract, which was like the stipulation was I had to be available and online on Discord from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. So I was basically working every single day, 8 hours, regimented. I was like, okay, this is no different than working a 9 to 5, right? So at a certain point, I was telling them, I'm like, I don't think it's valuable for me or you for me to just necessarily like just be sitting in front of Discord waiting to get marching orders. Like I could go, be doing research or go to a bookstore and like learn a few things about like the industry that you're working in and be a better asset for your team. But because I'm stuck to this computer, can't necessarily do that. But I was able to work out a situation where I was like, okay, on Monday we have a 9 a.m. meeting. You guys give me what you need for the whole week, and I can decide when and where I want to do that work, as long as I deliver it by Thursday for pre-approval and Friday for presenting. And that made me so happy because I had so much time to just be able to go do whatever I want, live my life, go get groceries, do my laundry, little things that you don't remember about adulting that I was just afforded by being able to control my own schedule. And I think that that's more valuable than anything, is like learning to respect your time. Like this all harkens back to like the idea of keeping a calendar, is like knowing how valuable your time is. And speaking of which, I want to make sure that I'm still on time. How are we doing on time?
We have 15 minutes left.
Perfect. All right. I'll go into like one little diatribe that I always like tell. I actually like told my mom like about this, that she'll probably remember. When I first got hired on as an assistant, I was getting paid like $20 an hour. And like some of the jobs that I was like getting sent to do was like picking up a lens and like getting on the train and taking it somewhere. And I was like, this is such silly work. Why don't they just go and do it? Like, why don't they just do it themselves? Why are they hiring me? Like, I'm grateful that they're hiring me. I need money. This is great. But like, I don't understand why they don't just go and do it themselves. Like, it makes no sense to pay somebody cash to just like grab a lens or grab an SD card or go pick something up from a store. And then I kind of sat down and I was like, there's got to be a reason why this person's doing this. Let me do the math on this. And I sat down and I go, okay, let's say this person's charging their client $80 an hour, and it takes them 45 minutes to an hour to go and do the errand that they're asking me to go do. You see where I'm going with this? They would lose $80 going to do it rather than spending $20 to have me do it. And sure, they're only making $60.
Oh, no, not you.
I'm defeated at this.
Oh, no.
What happened?
Yeah.
Am I
It's-
back?
Yeah, we can hear you now, but it says that your network bandwidth is low. Oh,
My network bandwidth is very high, I'll have you know. I got all the bars. No, I'm joking. I have no clue what's going on with my internet.
you're full screen now. You know, I'm off your truck.
Oh, I'm so sorry, guys.
$60. Yeah.
Ah, sure. Yeah. So they might be making 60, they might be only making $60, but they're not losing $80 is my point. And that went to show that like your time is valuable and how you value your time is important, because I was valuing my time at $20 an hour and this person's valuing their time obviously to the client for $80 an hour, and they knew how to use it. They knew how to, not necessarily, I don't want to use weaponize, but like to utilize their value and do the math and figure out, hey, you know, my time is worth something to somebody and it's worth somebody to somebody right now. Might as well contract out this small thing that's going to cost me money, but it's not going to cost me as much as I'd be potentially losing. And that was such a huge lesson overall. Like it's not even specific to that job or to hiring an assistant. It's just like, okay, I know what the potential of my value is to people. I know how I can stretch it. I know how I can shrink it down. I know what like the least amount that I'm willing to give up to somebody is. And holding that standard, setting those boundaries for people, like not letting people be late to meetings that you have, and like just saying, hey, you know what, I have to go. I have other things to do. And truly like treating yourself like a professional, but treating the other people around you as a professional and holding them to a higher standard is so important. I think a lot of people, and like I try to be mindful of this when I'm working with other people, is to always be on time. Like I was here at 9, maybe connecting at 9:01 because of my crappy internet, but like you have somewhere you want to be and you're here to listen to me because of, I don't know why, but you're here to listen to me. And so like, I don't take that for granted. I understand that you have other things that you want to do with your life. Like for example, I'm probably going to go to the gym after this. And like, I want to go do that. So like at 10:30, if like things were to still be going on, I'd be like, thank you so much guys, but I'm going to get going because I value my time with myself, my time going and taking care of my body, because I need to set myself up for the future. So yeah, things like that are really important. And I think that, I mean, I'm going into like kind of a really abridged version of the question that you asked, Tyler, but truly like being able to have freedom of your time and also control it and be able to set a true value to your time is different than being in a corporate environment where it's set for you. You have to wait for.
Oh, no.
Come back.
Oh, no, not yet.
You got this. Come on.
You're back now.
Oh my God. I just want to know how long I go on speaking before it cuts out. Like, I'm just curious to know how much I just go on and on. But anyways, yeah, being able to not let somebody else dictate what your value is and you being able to dictate your value. And sometimes you get rejected at that value and you got to be humbled. But for the most part, it's waiting to find the right people that see what you see in yourself.
Thank
Thank
you.